díomhain, harnash. Welcome to this video, which is going to be all about how stress works in Irish and the other vowels, the vowels that were a bit too complex to explain in my last video. Before I get straight into explaining how stress works, I do have one correction from the last video, which is that the combination of letters OI, along with the other pronunciation that I mentioned, can also be pronounced sometimes as as in the English word bed. So in Galway, you get this word pronounced as said, and in parts of Munster, you get this word pronounced as eadra. Anyway, let's get into it. What is stress? Stress is the difference between the English words garage and garage, adult and adult, present and present. So it's the emphasis in a word. Lots of languages have it, lots of European languages have it, and so does Irish. But unlike English and German, which have pretty random stress patterns, let's say, when I look at this English word, how can I tell if it's present or present? It could be either. Irish has quite consistent stress rules. It does vary between the dialects, and Munster stress can be quite different from the other two, but I will explain all of those differences. And if you know the rules, you can just instantly look at an Irish word and know straight away whether it has stress on the first syllable like adult, or stress on the second syllable like adult, or anywhere else. The first rule to know is that by default, every Irish word has initial stress. So these are some of our most common words that all have initial stress. Just a small list. So we have agus, elle, díomhain, céile, gaeilge, tháinig, obair, duine, deire, maidir, féidir, éadra, and fada. You can all tell with each of those they match the pattern of adult rather than adult. The second thing to know is that in every dialect there is a list that I have here of about 40 words that all have secondary stress. You will find most of these start with the letter A, and a lot of them also have this loss at the start of them. If you see a word that has loss in this list, it basically means a side. It has something to do with a side. And the very common words, and there is a lot of variation between the dialects in how these are pronounced, but I'm just going to have to pronounce them how I have learned. So you can tell a big difference with the first three, on so, on sun, and on sood, outside of Munster. Those are usually on shu, on shin, and on shood. And I'll just keep going. So we have anún, anál, anuas, anías, amach, isteach, amo, istig, lasmo, lastig, lastias, lastier, lastal, lasnerde, lasvos, avos, lastias, lastos, lastoid, lastoig, injov, anocht, reir, iné, ríis, anish, bhain, rain, amu, anaid, adoig, anyas, anir. And some random ones, kibé, which means whatever or whoever, ferer, which means alas, munur, which means alas, but it's worse. There's a lot of word for alas. Inian, daughter, tranhona, evening, tobacco, and some forms of the verb to be, even though you don't have all of these in your dialect. Atá, a time, atá mead, atáthar. and one that wasn't on the list, but I did think about, istithe. I'm pretty sure nobody says istithe. And that's it. And moving on to explaining the dialects, if you're learning Ulster Irish, that literally is it. Every Ulster Irish word, apart from those 40, has initial stress. For Connacht, there are 2 words that have secondary stress, which the others don't. I made a video about this before. So we have log, lig. There's a bit of variation there. Means all, as in us all. A keent and a keen means some, as in something. And then, so those 2 words are grouped in with the other secondary stress words. There's also something that happens in Connacht a lot, which was pointed out to me, where some words, a very small group of words that have, even though they have initial stress when fully pronounced, often lose their first syllable. So we have these words, even though they are in full, ran, edible, and taspán, they often are realised in Connacht as ran, rubble, or drubble, and spine. And this same thing happens in all dialect with the word and. So even though we have agus with stress on the a, you will find it pronounced everywhere as these different ways. So you can find it as agus, but also gus, us, is, and even very often as just s. Moving on to Munster. So Munster stress works a little bit differently. The rule is stress in Munster is attracted to heavy syllables. So if a word has no heavy syllables, it's just initial stress, like the other dialects. So we have in Munster agus, elle, and ubud, all with initial stress. But a heavy syllable is basically the syllables ACH or ACHT or any long vowels, especially words that end in, on, or og. So to give some examples of ACH and ACHT, we have bakach and imacht in Munster instead of bakach and imacht. Long vowels, we have words like lehéid or servish. And the common endings that I mentioned, we have words like calín, ran, and fuineog. Sometimes in Munster, this secondary stress is so strong that the first syllable vowel is actually lost. So instead of spirid and turus, in Munster, we have words like sprid and trus. And that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm going to make a whole other video about the specific details about Munster Irish stress and how it works comprehensively, because there are some other questions like what happens if a word has 2 heavy syllables, or what happens if I have a heavy syllable followed by a word that has initial stress. Lots of questions will all be answered in that video. And that is it for talking about the differences between the dialects when it comes to stress. Another related topic, which is next, is the schwa. So I talked about this type of vowel in my video about vowels, and it is the second E in telephone. So telephone. It's the most common sound in English, and the rule in English is any unstressed short vowel is pronounced like this, oh. And that means that all letters A, E, I, O, and U, if they're short and if they are unstressed, they'll be pronounced as in English. So here's an example of all 5. So we have comma, telephone, pencil, supply, and lemon. You can see and you can hear all of those are pronounced the same, A, E, I, O, and U. And Irish does a very, very similar thing. Ulster Irish has its own thing going on. I'll explain that in my Ulster Irish video, but this phenomenon of reducing an unstressed short vowel happens in Irish as well. The exact pronunciation of it, however, is a little bit different. It depends on whether it's a broad vowel, A, O, or U, or a slender vowel, so I or E. So an unstressed short A, O, or U is pronounced slightly differently to an unstressed short I or E, where in English they are all schwas, o. Only A, O, or U, unstressed, in Irish comes out as a schwa. So that's why we get the pronunciations fada and tanga. But if it's an I or an E unstressed, it comes more as an I. I, like the word bin. Examples include the Irish words dinne or banye. And even though we do have the I sound in English, and we do have the schwa as well, as in the word comma, it's not very common. So people struggle often to get this at the end of the word correct, or the I at the end of the word correct. And they often replace it with an A, so you get people saying changa and banya. But you can really make improvements to your pronunciation if you make an effort with this type of unstressed vowel. And that usually how it is in Connacht and Munster. There's a difference between the and the I depending on a broad environment or a slender environment, and that relates to the next topic. So what we're talking about next is epenthesis. There are plenty of videos online about epenthesis. It's actually quite well discussed, and that's because it's very simple. Epenthesis is basically what happens in the words gurum or anim. So what's happening here is there's only one vowel sound written in these words, but a small unstressed vowel is added in between the consonants to allow the word basically to be easier to pronounce. And as you can probably tell from the pronunciation, again, the exact sound of this small unstressed vowel depends on whether the consonants are broad, as in gurum, so you get a schwa there, gurum, or slender, so you get an I there in anim. It does depend on the speaker and does depend on the dialect, but to say it basically, that's how it shows up. Epenthesis happens after the letters L, N, and R between when they come before these letters. So to be really, really specific, and to give you the list because there's a couple exceptions, epenthesis happens after L with LB, LBH, LF, LG, LM, or LMH. So I'll just give some examples after each of these. So we have Olubin, Jaluf, Shelif, Bolug, Column, and Fulova. It happens after N with NB, NBH, NF, asterisk, NM, or NCH. So we get Bonaba, Nyanov, Conofach, Anim, and Shanachy. And it happens after or with or B, or BH, or F, or G, or M, and or CH. So we get words like Burub, Marov, Darafach, Farog, Arum, and Durcha. The exceptions are basically, it doesn't happen with NMH, so we get words like Anvi. It does not happen with or MH, so we get words like Forwar. It doesn't happen with LCH, so we get words like Kjolcharum. And it doesn't happen with NCH or NF when slender. So we get words like Inchin or buinfá. So I'm pretty sure slender NF can only happen in verbs. And also, just in case you're thinking, it can't happen with NG because NG is basically one sound always in Irish. As is always with Munster, Munster is the centre of phenomenons. If there's a phenomenon happening in the language, Munster probably has the most of it. And same thing with epenthesis. So sometimes you'll find Munster words that have epenthesis that don't follow an L, N, or, like the words suchrid or literacht rather than suchrid or literacht. Just keep an eye out. It happens sometimes. The best way is just to learn how to pronounce the words, listen out or look it up in the dictionary. And that's all for epenthesis. The last topic is about double letters. Now, double letters are very important outside of Munster. You will see them all in Irish words often, and some people assume that they don't really change the pronunciation at all. But not only can a double L, double N, or double R be different than a single L, N, or R in Galway, Mayo, and Donegal, the topic of this video is vowels, and these double letters can change the length of vowels before them. So, vowel lengthening can happen before a double L, a double N, a double R, a double M, NG, NT, or D, MP, and then in some rare words that has N and a different consonant other than NT, so sometimes ND. What this vowel lengthening exactly sounds like varies, and sometimes it doesn't happen, like in Ulster. It's really, really rare. Only happens in a couple words. And I will just give some examples of each of the environments that I just listed. So how I would pronounce these: pole, tún, bar, im, lung, úntach, ard, and timple. So instead of pole, how they would say it in Ulster, I would say pole. And that wouldn't be the exact same in Connacht. So it just varies from region to region. There's two rules to remember with this sort of lengthening. One is that the kryptonite of this lengthening is another vowel coming after the double letter. So if we can imagine the words aum, time, and im, butter, they have other forms: amma, which means of time, and ime, which means of butter. So because we've added that second vowel, there's a vowel coming after what would have given us the length, and now there's no length at all. And again, because this video is all about stress, this sort of vowel lengthening before a double letter only happens in stressed syllables. So if we have the word this, you might see the NT and the NN and think that both vowels are lengthened, but no, only one of them can be stressed, which means only one of them can be lengthened. So we get intin rather than inteen. One massive flaw about learning this, and one massive flaw about the standard spelling, is that a M that causes lengthening isn't written as MM. It's written as the same as any other M. So there's no difference between the spelling of aum and com, even though there is a difference in how the vowel is pronounced. It could very, very easily have been spelled aum, A-M-M. Same thing with im and im. So im means butter, im means in my. The word for butter could have easily been spelled I-M-M. Alas. And so this sort of vowel lengthening is strongest in Munster, again. Connacht has it, but it's quite different from the Munster pronunciation, and it barely shows up in Ulster Irish. So just to give an example of what these differences can sound like, with this word, which means a division or a small amount. In Ulster you get rinch, in Connacht you get rients, and in Munster you get riint. So you can tell Munster and Connacht both have the lengthening and Ulster doesn't. But even though Connacht and Munster share the lengthening, they're quite different to each other. And that is basically all I have to say. So if there is any takeaway you can get from this video, 1, L, N and OR share a lot of the same qualities. They both lengthen vowels and they both cause epenthesis. And 2, if there's ever a phenomenon in the Irish language, Munster Irish is usually the center of where it happens the most. So that's it. Stress and the other vowels, including unstressed short vowels, epenthetic vowels, and lengthened vowels from double letters. Sné chuirde, sláin, a goibh agus gnáidí libse. Glad.